So today we are going to talk about consent mode and specifically what to expect if and hopefully when you implement Google's consent mode on your Planet 4 or other websites. So what I'll do is share a high-level overview of what happened when we implemented this feature on Greenpeace International's website. But really the goal of the call, I think, is to understand what information we still need in order to be comfortable implementing this feature or any feature that respects privacy digitally within Greenpeace. So to get there, we will go through a quick recap of how we got here, why consent mode, what exactly it is. And I do want to say that I joined this project pretty late. So if you have any questions on why specifically consent mode was chosen, I would invite you to direct that to the Greenpeace International Insights team, just because they have a deeper understanding than I would about exactly what led to this tool. But I'll do my best to give a quick overview on that. Then we will move into the results of the Greenpeace International pilot. I'm going to talk about some key insights to tracking and main conversion rates, but this is by no means an in-depth overview. And the reason for that is because we didn't think it was a great use of everyone's time to take 2 hours here and go through specific metrics, but rather take the key insights that we think are going to be important to most, if not all, NROs. So we'll do an overview of that. And then at the end, I will send some resources of where you can find the full report, the raw data, and more information on that. So you can dig down and find what specific metrics are most important to you. Then we'll go through our recommendation and some risk mitigation considerations. Then after I spend almost 30 minutes talking at everybody, we can open up the floor for more of a discussion. So I would be really interested to hear from anybody who has implemented consent mode on a Planet 4 site or otherwise. I know we have Osvaldo here today who was kind enough to spend some time with me talking about the NRO perspective. So I will hopefully open up the floor to Osvaldo to give some insights on that. And then if anybody else has insight or experiences implementing this feature, we'd love to hear from you. And then after that, Luca has been kind enough to create a Miro board so we can capture all of the questions, the unknowns, and the critical impacts of implementing a project like this. So we can all find the information we need and comfortably move forward with this. And then at the very end, I'll come back and just give a very quick overview of the next steps for implementing Google Consent Mode. I won't give the step-by-step, but just an idea of what to expect and what that process looks like. So to start off, digital consent at Greenpeace. So I'm sure if you've been with Greenpeace for a while, you've heard all about GDPR. There's been many, many discussions over the last few years. But in 2021, the Greenpeace International Insights team took a look at the latest changes in privacy legislation all around the world. So GDPR in Europe, there's different privacy laws that are coming to Africa, and these are things that are likely going to spread all throughout the globe. So it's important for us all to stay familiar with this. And in their work, they identified a gap with Greenpeace's digital presence, which is that in order to comply with these regulations, every single Greenpeace website must receive users' consent before placing any cookie, with the exception of strictly necessary first-party cookies that you need in order for the website to run at all. But this does impact our analytical cookies and our advertising cookies. So we needed to make sure that there's something in place that stops if somebody does not want their cookies to be tracked. If they go onto a website and they say, no, I do not consent to my cookies being tracked, then that is being respected. So to achieve that, the team came up with a solution of a full rework of the consent mechanism in 4 parts. And the part that I'm going to focus on, of course, today is the implementation of Google's consent mode. So I'll be the first to admit I'm not a developer. I don't understand the ins and outs of how consent mode exactly works with the code and things like that. But my understanding is How it works is it goes in and adjusts whether or not tags fire based on the consent status of a user. So if I go onto Greenpeace International's website right now and I say, no, I do not want analytical cookies being captured, then Google Consent Mode intercepts and makes sure that none of the analytical tags are firing. And vice versa. If I say yes to analytical, but no to advertising, it adapts for that. Or if I say yes to everything, then consent mode says, okay, yes, you can collect everything. So this is really just an easy way to ensure that we are respecting every user's choice to accept or deny analytical cookies. And as you might expect, by enforcing this, we did anticipate we'd lose some data, because if we can't collect cookies without consent, then those who don't consent, we are losing that data. We had an idea that that was going to happen, but a choice was made to accept this risk in favor of respecting users' privacy, because ultimately it is the right thing to do. And with that, consent mode was implemented on GPI's website back in January. So we wanted to understand exactly what this would look like in terms of our data and our ability to make strategic decisions moving forward. And to take a look and understand this, we did a very basic analysis by taking data before it was implemented and data after it was implemented, and then looked at the differences. So we did a couple different time periods. We did short-term 3 weeks, we did long-term 3 months, and we combined all of the information that we gathered into a full report. And I'll share some of the key insights now. The very first one that I want to get out in front of is the impact that we had on trackable sessions. So if you look at this graph, you're going to see that there was a significant decrease in the amount of sessions that we can track. Overall, it was about 76%. On desktop, it was even more so, about 81%. On mobile, less so, which is interesting. There's been some theories as to why, but I won't get into those today. But the point of this is that there was a pretty significant decrease in the amount of trackable sessions that we have access to now. When I first saw this graph, I totally panicked, because I'm a data person. I want as much data as possible to make decisions. But after doing some reflection, some calculations, and figuring out exactly what data we need to achieve our mission, I feel a lot better about it. So we anticipated we'd lose the ability to track approximately 66% of users, and we did lose more than that, about 80% on Greenpeace International. However, the sample size that we have is still more than enough to provide statistical significance. A good rule of thumb for decision-making, a sample size for an online community is about 10% of the total population. So for Greenpeace International's website, that would mean that over a 3-month period, we would need data from 32,000 users in order for our decisions to be statistically significant. We still have data from over 200,000 users, so more than enough to be able to understand how users are using Planet 4 websites. Where this will be a larger issue is NROs with lower traffic than Greenpeace International's website. So I would recommend taking a look at a sample size calculator to understand, based on the amount of users that you've had before this is implemented, how many do you need in order to be able to understand how users use your website. That said, I recognize that this is not going to be an easy task for a lot of NROs. We're not all in a position where we have the users that Greenpeace International does. The audiences are just smaller, and we are happy to support and work with you in any way we can to be able to get the data that you need to make decisions to help support our mission. But with all of that said, for I think the majority of NROs, it should still be more than enough data to make decisions, which is wonderful, wonderful news. I am guilty of wanting quantity over quality sometimes, but at the end of the day, we're now gathering data from people who want us to have their data and not from those who do not consent, which is the most important thing at the end of the day. The next thing I want to touch on is the cookies bar interactions. So when you log on to Google Analytics after implementing consent mode, you will see that the amount of users or the percentage of users that are accepting all cookies is going to absolutely skyrocket. On Greenpeace International, it went up by about 70% after consent mode was implemented. And the main thing I want to note here is that this measurement is skewed. So it's a higher percentage, but this does not mean that more users are consenting to cookies because, of course, we're no longer tracking anyone who has denied consent. So with that, on GPI, we had about 85% of trackable new users consenting to all cookies, which means that 14% or so interacted in some other way. So consenting to some cookies, but not others, analytics, but not advertising, or vice versa, or interacting with the cookies bar in some other way that is not accepting or denying cookies. But we cannot track what percent of users are denying cookies. So with that, we can no longer run accurate A/B tests on the cookies bar. So if you are looking to redesign a cookies bar or the messaging and you want to run an A/B test, then you would have to disable consent mode in order for that data to be accurate. So that's really important to remember. We also took a look at some of our main conversion rates. The two that we focused on were take action and the donate button click-through rates, of course, because those are the two main metrics that really drive Greenpeace's mission and what we do. We noticed a small increase in both, so about 3% on the take action click-through rate. It went from, I believe, 6% to 9%, and a slight increase on the donate button click-through rate. And the one thing that I want to highlight here is that this is not necessarily caused by the consent mechanism. Correlation does not equal causation. There are many contributing factors to this. It could be a change in the website design, a change in content, particular marketing pushes, or news or events that are happening in the world that relate to our mission. So further research would be needed to determine whether or not this is actually caused by consent mode. But the important thing here is that there was no increase identified or decrease identified that can be directly attributed to consent mode, which is great. So we can still use these metrics for decision making, regardless of if consent mode is implemented. In contrast, a huge impact that we saw was that Google Analytics is no longer a reliable source of petition signups. So because we're only tracking those who consent to cookies, it will show a significant decrease in petition signups in Google Analytics. So we saw about 73% on Greenpeace International. So don't panic. That doesn't mean that we're getting 73% less signatures. It just means that we don't have that easy way to view the number of signups on Google Analytics anymore, and that will have to be tracked elsewhere. So whether that's your petition software directly or through the Greenpeace International Insights team or your NRO's Insights team, there does need to be something else in place to gather that information. The last thing that we took a look at was the impact that this would have on some third-party tools. So the ones that we focused on were HubSpot and Hotjar, because those are two that we know most NROs are using. For HubSpot, the cookies that are tied to HubSpot are considered marketing cookies or advertising cookies. So those cookies will only be sent when the user gives full consent or specifically gives consent to advertising cookies being used. If the user is on a Planet 4 website and they deny this privacy policy and then they move to a HubSpot page, those page views will still be blocked. So your data in HubSpot may also be impacted by this for anyone who is going to a HubSpot page from a Planet 4 page. This is not the case if they're going to HubSpot through another source that's not Planet 4. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the data, that there might be some changes there. On the other side of things, for Hotjar, there is no impact whatsoever. And the reason for that is because Hotjar already creates reports and projections based on samples rather than the full audience. So for GPI, our coverage is about 500 sessions a day, so 8% of total traffic. And we still have way more than that incoming despite consent mode being activated. So there's no impact whatsoever there. And we did cross-reference that with the statistics that Hotjar gives us, and there's been no significant changes there. I expect that this is also what will happen if you're on Google Analytics 4, where there is some modeling capabilities there. So it might not be the same data that you're getting before, but there is the ability to make projections and model. The same thing goes with if you're using Google AdWords, things like that. I'm not super familiar with that, so please don't take my word for it, but I believe that there is some capability there that might help us through our analysis. So overall, there were some good and some bad things about implementing consent mode. Of course, it is a disappointment to lose some trackable sessions and not having that easy way to see petition signups or other transactional data is definitely a challenge. A/B tests might require longer timelines in order to obtain proper sample sizes. Same for any analysis. If you're used to having a lot of users in a short period of time, you might need to build in some more time there. And of course, the HubSpot page views will also be blocked if a user declines cookies. But with all that said, we're now offering the opportunity for users to give informed consent, and we're respecting the choice to accept or decline cookies, which means we're GDPR compliant. And we're respecting our supporters and our users. And with that, Google Analytics data is still statistically significant, which is great. We can still use that for decision making, and there are very limited impacts to the key success metrics and almost no impact on strategic decision making, at least for GPI. That may be different for NROs, and I am very interested to hear how this is all going to come together and impact NROs. But at the GPI level, it was great news for us. So with all of that considered, despite some impacts to our ability to analyze with Google Analytics, the Planet 4 team does recommend that all NROs implement Google Consent Mode on their individual sites. If your website is in the European Union, respecting cookie preferences is mandatory in order to comply with the local privacy laws. And there are alternatives to Consent Mode or custom solutions that are available, but the Planet 4 team can't provide support on those alternatives at this time. So that would require speaking internally within your NRO and your data team and your developer team and the legal team to make sure that all of that is being followed. And we did have a question in the call yesterday about whether or not this decision rests with the Planet 4 team or with the NRO. And I do want to assure everyone that the decision does rest with the NRO. We are certainly not going to force anybody to implement consent mode, especially in a situation where it would have a significant impact to your ability to reach your Greenpeace mission. But this is the solution that the Planet 4 team will be supporting and implementing within Planet 4. We hope that we can find a way that works for everybody, but of course, we're not going to force it upon any NRO where it won't work. And I just wanted to start to wrap up here with a quote that I thought was really impactful from the Insights Team Web Analytics 3.0 document. I believe this quote is from Ibrahim, but it is that Greenpeace should champion the privacy of our supporters above all benefits. At our core, Greenpeace is an activist organization, and many of our supporters are activists who care deeply about privacy and security. We should be the leading NGO in privacy, collecting only the data that is critical to our mission with a full acknowledgement and consent from our supporters. And that resonated with me so deeply because yes, of course, I want as much data as possible, but really, do we need data from every single person who goes on a Planet 4 website in order to achieve our mission? No, we don't, but we're happy to have the data from those who consent and that we can use that to improve our services and support our mission. But the team is right. Above our supporters, above all else, is what we need to do with our online presence. So I wanted to end my section of talking at you with just some tips that I found in my experience when conducting analysis after consent mode was implemented. And that is, number one, mark down the date that you launch consent mode so that you can look at it for any long-term analysis. I have a sticky note on my computer. Google Analytics has a flag function, so you can flag it and see directly in graphs when this was implemented. So you know, okay, this is when I'm going to start to see a decrease. When comparing website performance before and after implementation, make sure to calculate percentages rather than counts because the counts will decrease quite significantly. If you're doing any testing like A/B tests, you might require longer timelines to reach the sample size that you're used to. And a minimum sample size for those kind of tests is 100 users. So make sure that you're reaching that. And if not, we can help support in whatever ways that we can. And lastly, make sure that you have a mechanism in place to track petition signups and donations outside of Google Analytics. So with all of that, I am really interested to hear the experience of any NROs that have already implemented consent mode. I know that I'm going to put Osvaldo on the spot here just because I know that his team has implemented it. Would you be willing to take some time to share your experience and insights with that process?
Yes, of course. Thanks for inviting me. We're actually not invited for, but we have implemented consent mode in January 2021. So when it was still beta. Well, first to say that in Spain, as part of the European Union, for us it was not an ethical discussion. It was never discussed if we should do this or not. This was something we had to do. And most of us agreed it's a good thing for our users and for ourselves, but we didn't spend much time with the ethical discussion. One thing that surprised us is that, well, we did an A/B test in the beginning to know what impact would this have. And during this A/B test, which lasted 1 month, so in 2021, we measured all users from all options, either with or without consent, either without giving approval for cookies. And our results were that the impact that this had in our specific case was not that significant. I can share some very quickly a screen just so you have some idea of the numbers. May I? So 1 second. Okay, so sorry for this chart. This was not meant to be very pretty. It's quite rough, but we did the original, which was what we had before with only informing about cookies. We did what we had now, which is a variant that blocks cookies with a bar, and then people have to go here and they have to refuse or accept cookies. And we did a third one, which it was on the footer, and it was very, very discreet. In the variant one, which is the one we implemented, the number of people that do not interact is far fewer than the people that interact. It was one of the reasons we chose this variant, but it was not the only one. So we had far less acceptance. The number of people that refuses cookies or selects them is very small. As you can see here, the bar is completely small, and even hosts, well, when they choose this, most of them refuse all, but the message on the footer had a far bigger number of people that don't interact with the banner. But that, of course, this was one of the factors. The A/B test, we tested how many people signed petitions. And for example, with the one without cookie advertisement, the conversion rate was 16.89%. And the one we adopted was 15.75. So in terms of impacting signups here, we are talking about 3% less or something. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but well, it's from 16 to 15. And the variant where we had the banner on the footer was with a bigger loss still. So people would prefer the blocking experience, to the other one. Well, at least they signed up more when they saw this. And the other test we've made is people who saw more than one page, and here was even more surprisingly, or not, but people that were exposed to the variant where they see this blocking page, they were more keen to visit more than one page, more even than the original, which is quite surprising, which the reason we didn't ask anything. We were quite surprised. Maybe the difference is not that big. Maybe it's not statistically significant. So I would say it's very similar. And the one below, it's also very similar. So we now follow the law, which we are very happy about. We go home and we are relaxed that the police will not come at our house or sue Greenpeace for this. And the results we had didn't really impact that much. I mean, we have statistical significance for everything. Of course, when we do monthly reports, more than before, you have to go and see the number of signups in Salesforce or in HubSpot, and you have to go and see the donations in Salesforce or HubSpot, and you cannot rely on the number from Google Analytics. Before there was also some failure. Now the error is bigger, but basically nothing has really changed a lot. It didn't affect our bottom line for what we understood. And it's also surprising that we always think, oh, the blocking one is awful, but it's the one that got better user acceptance and got better results. And this is why we kept it.
Board again, if I have done my job correctly by clicking on that link, you should arrive to a Miro board that looks like this. Essentially, it's pretty straightforward. I'm very happy that we have a lot of European NROs in the call, because you see, as Osvaldo was saying before, is really ethically, it's our ethical duty to actually abide to these regulations. But however, as you might have seen, we have done these assumptions based on product development from a product team perspective. So from a product team perspective, the platform team could survive and could develop the product using data without a problem. However, it's critical that we have the perspective of the NROs. So if you go in this Miro board, we have just captured the impacts, the negative and the positive impact. Ideally, the positive outweighed the negative, and reminding of the data. If we implement this, or what you will, what kind of data you will be able to rely on as a sample. And there is a section for questions. If you have any questions, there is a section for suggestions, like the two that Marie just shared. And there is a section for critical impact. Now, I don't think I have to go through question and suggestion, but critical impact is, please make sure to read first what people have done. And if you find something that you actually agree with, put a +1 or a star I or whatever. So any critical impact, please indicate any massive impact on your work that we have not considered. For instance, ads. How will this impact the way you pay the agencies you work with in terms of ads, if you cannot rely on real-time data? Or how will this impact the way you measure the success of your campaigns? Unclear. This kind of stuff is something that we want to dig deeper, and we want your opinion on.
Sorry, Luca.
What's up?
How do we add +1 on the slides?
So you just click on the post-it, you see, and you have a series of, and you have the emojis. But you can also do it the old way, Marie, and you can also do +1, whatever feels better.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna do 5 minutes. Oh yeah, and one last thing for me. You see, we have a lot of questions that we have replied yesterday in the call, but I understand that there are other people that might want to hear the reply to this question. If you want to, please just change the color or react with an emoji, do whatever you want to make sure we discuss it. And then, yeah, the post-it that has more votes will be the ones that will get discussed, because unfortunately our time is limited. All
right. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on was just some next steps with implementing consent mode, because of course we all have all our questions answered and we're ready to do it this afternoon, right? I'm just kidding. But if you do implement it, just to give an idea of the process, we do have a step-by-step guide done up on how to implement consent mode. It's available on our Git book. I'll make sure that that is sent out to everybody. It's a fairly easy process, a little tedious, but it's something that can be done in less than an afternoon. So there's 3 parts really. The first part is to enable consent mode in Planet 4. So that is literally checking a box. So you go onto your Planet 4 settings, your analytics settings, and there will be a checkbox for consent mode. Just make sure that that is checked. After that, you need to go into your Google Tag Manager account and make some adjustments. So you'll have to create a new data layer variable and a couple new custom event triggers. There's information on how to do that on our Gitbook as well. And if there's any questions, please feel free to contact me. I spend a lot of time in Tag Manager, so I can certainly help you out there. Then you navigate within the tags to implement consent view, which is again just a check. And then you can bulk edit all of the tags that you want to be included with consent mode. So that would be anything that is not directly necessary for the website to function. So any of your analytics tags, HubSpot, Hotjar, Facebook Pixel, anything like that would have to be included in that. And then you add the custom event triggers that you made to those tags. I believe you can do that in bulk as well. And then it's done. Then you can begin to test. It's very easy to turn on and off. You just need to do that within Planet 4. So if it's something that you want to try out and see how it impacts, then you can definitely do that. And then the last thing I just want to direct everybody to is some information that we have on this, which is 2 Medium articles, one that was written by Julia on reworking the Planet 4 consent mechanism, and one that was written by yours truly on the impact of consent mode on GPI that has a little bit more information and a video on some of the more specific metrics that we took a look at. And there's also a full impact report available that I'll make sure everybody has access to, and you can have the raw data as well. It's just from Google Analytics, so it's nothing, there's no security issue there. So we'll make sure that all of that is sent out. And with that, thank you everybody for joining. If there's any questions that, please continue filling out the Miro board if anything comes up. But if there's anything after that Miro board is no longer in place, please reach out to us at P4 General on Slack. We'd love to hear from everybody. We promise we don't bite, and we may not have all the answers, but we can commit to doing our best to help you find them. So thank you, everyone.